O'Shea, you wouldn't even be able to become a doctor, and you know this very well. So why are you pandering to people, man? Why are you presenting this false narrative? What did civil rights do for black people? It increased the wealth that black people have. It helped reduce poverty in the black community. That's what it did. When you compare the poverty rates at the time when the Civil Rights Act was passed to the present, there has been substantial improvement. When you think about, when you ask what has the civil rights movement done for black people, well, because of the civil rights movement, there are more educated black people than ever before. Because of the civil rights movement, there are more black millionaires and billionaires than ever before. Because of the civil rights movement, there are more politicians, black politicians than ever before. There are so many advances that we have made because of civil rights. And I just think that it is asinine, it's just downright stupid for someone to even raise that question, especially somebody who has benefited greatly from the civil rights movement, somebody who's receiving a higher education because of the civil rights movement, someone who has the nerve to talk about integration destroying the black community while you go to a white school in Poland. Come on, son, that doesn't even make any kind of sense at all. Now, the next thing he raised was this. He talked about how Booker T. Washington left infrastructure, and he said that these other people like King and W.E.B. Du Bois and even Malcolm X didn't leave infrastructure. So let's talk about this for a second. The fact that somebody left a school, that doesn't absolve them of other problematic issues dealing with their political ideology. So that's number one. Number two, you have different types of leaders in our community. All leaders are not going to play the same role in our community. It's much like a chessboard. Each piece has a different role. Some people are in business, some people are in education, people are in different fields. People have different roles. Some people are supposed to serve as social justice activists in our community. That's their mission. Some people are supposed to be the educators. Some people are supposed to build institutions and businesses. So there are different roles for different people. So the fact that W.E.B. Du Bois didn't build a school or something like that, that doesn't take away from his legacy. W.E.B. Du Bois is recognized as one of the greatest intellectuals of the 20th century. He has written masterpieces that have influenced history. Not only that, this man may not have built a school, but he built an organization. An organization that would go on to become the largest and oldest civil rights organization in America, and that's the NAACP, an organization that still exists today, an organization that is still fighting for social justice today. That's a powerful legacy because of people like W.E.B. Du Bois, the founder of the NAACP. You have important cases like the Brown versus the Board of Education and other important civil rights cases that eliminated and eventually dismantled Jim Crow. That kind of legacy is illustrious. And when you look at somebody like Martin Luther King, because of his work, we have civil rights laws on the books now, the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, and other great civil rights legislation that protects our rights today. Our basic right to go where we want, the basic human dignity to be able to go to any restaurant we want, any We can go on any kind of public transportation that we want to without being forced to the back of the bus. We no longer have to see the colored signs and the whites only signs and all that kind of stuff because of brothers like Martin Luther King. And then you mentioned Malcolm X not leaving any infrastructure. Well, first of all, Malcolm X was a minister in the Nation of Islam. If it wasn't for Malcolm X, the Nation of Islam would not have grown to the extent that it did. That brother helped build mosques around the country. Many of them still stand today. That's a builder. That's somebody that left something, a legacy. And besides leaving physical structures, ideas are just as powerful as any building that somebody can build. Ideas are powerful. I mean, as you've heard, the pen is mightier than the sword. Their ideas are more powerful than some building or some school being built because their ideas have motivated generations to follow in their footsteps. And I mean, one thing that's important to note about Malcolm X, he did not have the opportunity to build anything after he left the nation. He was assassinated within a couple of years after he left the Nation of Islam. So that's something that needs to be taken into account. Also, I mean, you talked about Booker T. Washington working with George Washington Carver and all that kind of stuff. And you talked about how Tuskegee went on to become a full university where they have a wide range of subjects that people can study and all that kind of stuff. But that doesn't change the fact that Booker T. Washington did not advocate African Americans receiving a liberal arts education. He did not advocate black people exploring these other fields besides agriculture and vocational fields. That's just a fact. And all that does is regulate black people to a second-class status. You can't build a strong society, a strong community based on that, based on agriculture and industry alone. You need philosophers, you need thinkers, you need scientists, you need business people. You need all those ingredients, doctors, lawyers, all of that in order to build a strong society. And that's something that Booker T. Washington neglected. I mean, that's something that is pointed out in that famous Atlanta Compromise speech that you're probably familiar with. Also, I want to point out this. I mean, I was going online and I saw an article that Yvette Carnell posted containing a quote from Booker T. Washington. They basically epitomized the fact that this brother had no knowledge of self. This brother basically looked upon white people as some kind of civilizing agent. Like white people helped civilize black people. And he suggested that Native Americans and Africans came from barbarism, that we were uncivilized until we came in contact with this white man. So I'm going to leave that quote in the description box for those of you who aren't familiar with the quote. I don't have it in front of me, so I don't want to misquote it, but I will include that quote in the description box. So, I mean, the bottom line is this. This brother played the role of a coon. And, people want to debate about this issue of politics versus wealth and all that kind of stuff, and the quest for social justice versus, just focusing on building wealth. Even Booker T didn't truly believe that we should tolerate being second-class citizens. I mean, because that brother behind the scenes was giving money to organizations like the NAACP and other civil rights groups. So even he didn't believe, this stuff that, people like O'Shea Duke Jackson are wasting their time defending. He didn't believe in his heart that it was a good thing for black people to temporarily be subjugated. Again, Booker T. Washington put on a show for these white people. He said what needed to be said in order to get things from them. And behind the scenes, he was giving money to civil rights groups. So he was wearing the mask of a coon. He was playing the role of a coon. And also someone, O'Shea Duke Jackson mentioned this, and this is going to be the last point before I go. He mentioned that Booker T. Washington was all about doing for self. That man, when you look at it, he wasn't really about doing for self. Because if he was about doing for self, he would not